everyone. Welcome to Confidently Be You. Today, my guest is Tanya Jaklis, who is a certified life and leadership coach supporting women as they rediscover and embrace who they are, prioritize their well-being, and lead authentically. She works together with her clients to create and execute a vision for their life that energizes and inspires them. Tanya, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you. Tanya did another video with me recently that you can catch if you want after this one on the topic of self-care, self-care and self-compassion. And I'm also going to include the link to that if anybody wants to check that out. So today we're going to talk about a really deep and important topic, which is dealing with grief during the holidays. And we're going to talk about different types of grief. I think even before COVID-19, grief during the holidays is especially, painful for people because you're either not spending time with a loved one, but if you've experienced other types of grief, such as through divorce, loss of a job, if you come from a toxic family, or maybe you have family that doesn't live nearby, it can be a very triggering time of year. And especially with all of the challenges we've had since 2020, I felt like it was a really important topic to have a conversation about right around the time of the holidays. So thanks for coming back, Tanya.
Yeah, sure thing. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so as I just mentioned, types of grief through job loss, toxic family, divorce, loss of loved ones. What are some other types of grief that I haven't mentioned that you might think of?
Yeah. I think it's so important that, like you said, it's grief can be experienced, of course, like losing a loved one, but then all the other things that you mentioned. Another one that I've been actually recently thinking about, and especially around the holidays, it's like, some of us have different traditions. So sometimes like loss of traditions, right? So I think, just things changing or family creating new traditions, right? And so experiencing that, it can also be new and exciting, but there might be a part of you that, we used to do this, or so-and-so used to be here. And so there's that loss of traditions. And the other one is, not necessarily loss of self, but this is something that's been coming up for me as well, is that, we all change. We don't stay the same, right? We go through different seasons, but sometimes I will say, I think that maybe that we experience grief around like a loss of who we once were, or what we were able to do. I mean, and I'll just give you an example, right? Of like becoming a mom, right? And and then, your priorities shift. It's not that you don't love the person you are as a mom or who you're becoming, but there might be a sense of like, oh, I do miss that I used to do these things, right? Or, because they're different seasons. And it's just acknowledging that and experiencing it, right? So those two other ones have been things that kind of have come up that I've associated grief and kind of loss with as well.
I love those examples. You're absolutely right. For example, if two people get married and they come from different faith backgrounds and they're creating new traditions together, there could be a sense of grief of the change, right? You're creating something new, so it's exciting and fun.
Yes.
But then it could also feel different and uncomfortable. Also, if there's any pushback from family members in those situations too, unfortunately, some people could have family members who aren't supportive of those changes. And so that can also be a sense of grief through those changes. And also what you were saying about self and identity. And, when we go through different seasons through ourselves, and when you're a mom or a parent, you do go through a lot of identity shifts. And I think as moms, we go through different shifts during pregnancy, right? Because you're going through all those changes that you're going through. And then after you have your child, there's a whole slew of identity changes that you're going through. And then as your kids get older, there's also that identity shift. And then when you become an empty nester,
Exactly.
that's a whole other identity shift too. And as many people I've spoken to through all these different phases, sometimes you feel lost with who you are, because you know who you used to be, but you're not you're not that person anymore, but then you're not sure who that next version of yourself is also.
Right. Yeah. I love that you brought up identity. I think that's so important to acknowledge and to, to experience that and just to lean that. And it's the acknowledgement piece and the awareness piece, right? That's so important.
Absolutely. And before we dip into the other topics with this, just to focus a little bit more, zoom in on identity, what are some tips you would like to share with others on if they're experiencing loss of their identity or they're feeling uncertain about who they are? How can they?
What a good question, Jen, just around that and identity. And, what comes up for me is, I'm going to say coaching, right?
Yeah.
But that will help support you with kind of rediscovering and redefining who you are. The thing is too, I think when we feel a sense of loss of ourselves, especially through different transitions or different seasons, it's the other thing to remind ourselves. I mean, this is another tool, is it's normal, right? When we're experiencing change or we're going through transition, I think part of us, I know for me, and I've seen it with my clients, is that, why am I having such a hard time? Why do I feel lost? Why this? I should know, I should understand. Well, but you're experiencing something new, right? You were doing something, or you were being this person for how long, right? And now things are shifting for one reason or another. I mean, if we keep with the parenting example, even that you used, right? Like there are different seasons to it. So, I actually have a lot of coworkers who had kids that were going off to college. So like the empty nesters, right? It's new. Like I've had my children in my home, taking care of them and balancing all these things for how long, right? My focus has been on so many different other things. It's completely normal to then say, okay, who am I now? What am I doing now? But I think that's the beauty. I think it's the beauty of acknowledging that it's normal, but then also acknowledging that, hey, I get to create myself over and over and over again. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, it's creating something new for yourself. Whenever I am creating a new season for myself, I validate myself and letting myself know that the discomforting feeling is normal. Coaching's been very helpful for me through that process, and then helping my clients just becoming aware of their feelings and just being kind to yourself during that stage, not trying to force yourself, oh, I need to get over whatever I'm feeling right now. I think that is a common thing that people run into with all kinds of grief. And especially like with a grief of a loved one, where people are like, oh, you should be over that by now. There's no one size fits all process for dealing with grief, whatever it might be. But yeah, just to add to what you were saying, thinking about visualizing what it is I want to create, and kind of thinking about your life as a piece of artwork, like a painting or a collage. And what is it that you are creating? We're so quick to want to know what the destination is, and we lose track of just enjoying the journey. And there are times when I feel that way, where it's like, I just want to know how this is going to work itself out.
Yes.
What I've done is I've paused myself and I'll think about times where I wasn't sure what the outcome was going to be, and then it ended up working out even better than I would have imagined. And so I think about those times, and that kind of helps me calm down to know and trust the process, that even though I don't know what the outcome is going to be, things are going to work themselves out. I just don't know what that is yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that you brought that up too, just like coming from a place of calm. It's so different for us to see things when we come from a place of calm versus when we feel like just overwhelmed either by the change or by the grief. And so I think I heard you even say like pausing and yeah, just pausing.
Yeah.
You froze on me for a second.
Yeah,
there,
pausing
so.
is definitely, what's that?
You froze there for a second, so I don't know if I did too, but.
That's, yeah, you froze on me there too. Hey, everybody, we're having some glitchy internet issues. So I'm going to try to edit through them the best I can, but just in case any scenes look weird, it's because the internet is being wacky right now. But basically we're talking about being in that place of calm. I think that's what you were saying. Because then we're able to think in a less reactive place when we're in a much more calmer mindset.
Right, exactly right.
So what are some of your personal experiences with grief that you would like to share with anyone watching?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Jen, if you had asked me that like probably a couple of years ago, I would have said, well, no, I don't want to talk about it, right? It was very much like avoidance of it or not really acknowledging it. But I would say my experience has been actually a couple different ones, right? I lost my mom over 12 years ago suddenly.
Sorry,
so she passed away. She was really young. And so that was something that took a while to kind of process, and still I would say kind of comes up at times, right? So even as you mentioned earlier, right, there's no timeline for grief. There's no like right or wrong. Everyone experiences what they experience. And so I think that's also just really important when we talk about grief. If it's grief of a loved one or even grief of something else, like of a job or anything like that, there's no timeline, right? There's just, it's your time, whatever you need to kind of process it. So, and then loss of job. So I was actually part of a restructuring a couple years ago, where there was a restructuring of the organization, and mine, along with actually close to like hundreds of jobs, were terminated. And that actually at the time too hit me like a ton of bricks, because it was, there was a lot of disappointment, there was a lot of sadness, there was a lot of, what do I do now? Obviously different than like the loss of a loved one, but I would say even like some of the same feelings came up, right? Like sadness, emotions. I remember being very triggered with like a whole lot of tears, even tears, because it was just, it's loss, right? It's loss.
Right.
You contributed your life, you dedicated your life to a job that, that you enjoy, that you go to every day. It's a sense of routine. And now, just like with a flip of a switch, things are just turned upside down. There's loss there. There's loss.
Absolutely.
And so sadness, disappointment, those feelings that are completely normal human emotions, but are also extremely uncomfortable, are normal, right? So, but those are two that kind of come to mind, of ones that I would say even just have shaped me and shaped who I am right now, and having experienced those losses and kind of grieving through experiencing grief due to those losses have been some of my experiences.
Thanks for sharing that. I can relate to those as well. I lost my mom back in 2007 from a heart attack. It was very unexpected. And for a while, I just kind of didn't want to look or feel any of it. And right after that had happened, I had started a new job and moved to another city. And so there's all these things that were distracting me for a while from that experience. And then a few months later, after the dust settled from all that transition, then it smacked me in the face like a ton of bricks. It was like, okay, now and yeah, it was a big process. And the healing I went through with that, and also I went through a divorce, which also you go through a lot of identity shift through that experience. Because, you know, as we were talking about before, recreating traditions, you know, you create traditions with somebody and now you're creating traditions without them. And, you know, you share a child with this person. So what are those traditions going to look like? And then also being part of restructuring, I went through that as well. And it can be very topsy-turvy when you go through all these different experiences. But what I have found through them is, like, when you're in the storm, it just doesn't feel good. And so it's, how can you take care of yourself the best you can through those moments? And then, like we were saying before, the timeline, it's, everyone's going to go through it differently. If you have siblings who experience the loss of a loved one, they're going to experience it differently from you. And yeah, it's a lot to sort through when you go through all of that. But then after the fact, there's a lot of beauty, at least that I've experienced from that. Like, I've created new traditions with my son to honor my mom. Mm-hmm. So she loved strawberry milkshakes from Carvel. So on her birthday, we either get milkshakes out or make some. I'm vegan now, so like I'll make a vegan version of it. So my mom's birthday, we make strawberry milkshakes or get strawberry milkshakes out to celebrate her birthday. And then Thanksgiving was like a really special holiday for her. So I'll make some of her recipes. And yeah, just little things like that to just create something special to still honor her memory. And yeah, it's been a while now. It's been over 14 years. And it's I don't know if easier is the right word. I think you just evolve and you accept and you get used to how things are without them. But then there's just certain times where it's really hard. I think for me, as my son gets older and she misses out on certain big milestones with him, and then certain holidays and family gatherings, that's especially when it's a harder time for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's triggering, right? Because and thanks so much too for sharing that with me in this space as well, because and the way that you've created meaning in like honoring her and remembering her, and that, you know, there is still that memory and keeping that memory alive, which sounds like gives some comfort as well. And it's almost like you're celebrating her life, you're celebrating the things that she enjoyed. Mm-hmm. But that loss, yeah, like you said, is just, it's still there. It's still like a sense of loss. And sometimes, especially around the holidays, I feel like it, I can relate to that. You know, I think for whatever reason, the holidays, and I know for myself, kind of triggering is the day she passed away. And then on her birthday, there's just some triggers there that happen. And for me, I think what I've leaned into is just letting myself feel whatever that is, and being okay with that versus trying to push it down. I will say, even this year, my mother's birthday was just this past October, so just a few weeks ago, and I had a moment where I just let myself cry. I think it was in the shower, and it was just, I just like let it all out, because it was just, that's what needed to happen, right? It was like cathartic. It was great. I'm like, it's okay. And then on to the next, you know, and then kind of continue through my day, but let myself feel that.
Yeah. Absolutely. What you were saying about just giving yourself that space to feel what you needed to feel, and letting yourself purge that emotion. I think sometimes we feel shame, like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this. And then we try to like suppress it. It leads to what I call emotional constipation, right? Because like when you, that's what I call it with my clients.
But I mean, I think you're right. It's if you don't let the emotion out or you don't experience it, it gets stuck. And that's,
Right. And it
it
shows
gets
up in your
stuck.
life in other ways, right?
Yes, yes.
And it's not pleasant. You might be like,
No.
I used to numb myself because I didn't want to feel. I'd rather just not feel.
Mm,
And that ended up being worse. It's kind of like when you
mm.
sweep dirt under the rug, the dirt's still there. It's just not in plain sight.
Hiding.
But eventually you're going to run out of room. You're not going to be able to keep sweeping the dirt under the rug. And eventually you're going to have to start looking at it, which is what happened in my life. It just got to a point where it's like, okay, I really need to take an honest look at what's going on in my life. And yeah, it doesn't feel good.
Right.
But
right.
it feels better. It allows you to create that healing for yourself. That's so important. And so what are some other tips that you would like to share about how you've coped with grief, of the various types of grief that you shared just now?
Yeah. I think one of the big tips I would give is finding people to talk through it with. So people that you trust, people that obviously you're not going to talk to everyone about it, but people that you trust and that you're comfortable with. Find those people. I know for me, with the loss of my mom, after a few years, therapy was helpful. That was helpful for me to kind of process and experience that and really acknowledge like the pain and the disappointment and the sadness that I was feeling. That was really, really helpful. And I would say too, with like a loss of job, again, processing that and being and acknowledging like what you're feeling and talking it through. So that could be a mentor, that could be a coach, that could be a dear friend, that could be a partner. And remember at the time, a lot of people were reaching out, wanting to be very supportive and asking how they could help. And at first I was very kind of resistant. I'm like, let me figure this out on my own. I'm going to deal with this. I didn't want people to see how hurt I was or how disappointed I was. But then I kind of came around to the idea of like, okay, no, like, I don't have to do this by myself. Like, let's talk it through. Let's learn from this experience. And I would say that made a world of difference, right? That really made a world of difference of leaning into having conversations, sharing kind of what I was going through, what I was thinking, what I was experiencing. And so that supported me a lot. And then I would say taking care of myself, going back to, and I think you mentioned it at some point too, Jen, it's just self-care and taking care of ourselves and just making sure that we put that focus that we are well, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally, right? And taking the time to do that. Because if we feel well, then we can be better equipped to deal with some of the challenges that come up, right? It helps to kind of build our resilience because loss is not going to go away, right? I mean, we're going to lose things, people, experiences, traditions, all those things. It's a part of life. Like change is the one thing that's constant. And so from taking care of ourselves, though, I feel as though this has been my experience, and I've seen it with my clients too. They're more resilient to respond to the change or the challenges that come up. So I would say those are two tips, right? Find your people, talk it through.
Absolutely.
And then figure out what it looks like to take care of yourself, like mind, body, and soul, and physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Those are great tips. And it's like what we talked about in the last video that we did together is self-care, self-compassion. It's not a luxury. It's so very important. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to put that in the bottom of this video because that ties in with all of that, taking care of yourself, when you need to take care of yourself. Those are great tips. I just want to add a couple as well. Journaling is so important. It's helped me through all of those processes because you can just mentally vomit everything you're thinking and feeling and just dump it all out. And there's something very cathartic about that for me and a lot of people I've worked with, just doing that mental dumping in your journal, because you're just getting it out. And then I know from my experiences is you start to see things differently when you might get some kind of an insight or a connection, something, maybe a new perspective after you do that. Even it could just be feeling better, just needing to get it out somewhere. And then therapy, definitely very important. Finding your people who you can talk to, coaching, those are all great resources. And then another thing I wanted to share is don't fall into the comparison trap. Like if you're, especially during the holidays, there's a lot of holiday movies about, you see these perfect families sitting around the table. And if you're in a family situation that's not like that, whether it's due to distance or other chaotic factors that could be the case, don't fall into that comparison trap and find the opportunities of what you can create for yourself to have a meaningful holiday, whether it's get together with friends. I was speaking to a friend recently, and she's creating her own Thanksgiving dinner that she's excited to have with her dog, and she's got her plan of what she's going to cook and watch, and she's going to have some me time. So we have the power to reframe a situation and create a different meaning for ourselves. So I just wanted to throw, not comparing yourself to what other people might have and then looking at what you don't have, and just looking at the things you do have and what you can do to make the holiday season special and meaningful for you.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I think the comparison piece is so easy to get sucked into, right? As often as we set intentions that we're going to do things differently, sometimes we can fall into that, and being mindful of it. And I love that what you just shared about your friend, right? Like, it sounds like she's super excited about it. She's created kind of a day for herself that's meaningful to her, right? And so we do get to have the ability to create those things. And as long as it makes you feel good, as long as you are enjoying it, as long as you find the joy and the meaning in it, that's what's, at the end of the day, that's what's important. And so I think that definitely can happen sometimes a bit more easily when we don't fall into the comparison trap, as you said, and just focus on our well-being, what brings us joy, and then really kind of seek out joy, right? Like, look for the joy in your own life, right? It's there. So it's like looking for it and seeking it out. Sometimes when we fall into the comparison trap, we have like blurred vision on things that might be right in front of us in our own lives, right?
Absolutely. I loved what you just said about look for the joy in your life, right? And it goes down to the gratitude piece. Some people might think it's cheesy to, sit, and I know it gets mentioned a lot everywhere, but there's actually something very powerful about gratitude. It's something that I do, especially if I'm having a crappy day and I feel like everything is going wrong in my life. You just shut your eyes for 5 minutes and think about the things that are going right in your life. Your mood is going to be so much different. You're going to feel better. And that's the power in having that gratitude piece and finding the joy and just creating the joy. We have the power to create what we want to have. And if the ideal situation isn't happening, what can we do instead? That there's always an opportunity for us to try something different, create a new tradition for yourself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, linking it even back to grief a little bit too, is that like kind of around the creating new traditions. If something is feeling too hard or too heavy, or, doing the same thing or doing the same tradition, it's bringing up, like, triggering a lot of things, like, acknowledge that and then just give yourself permission to maybe like shift the tradition, or to do something else that maybe injects meaning for you, that helps you either remember that, in the case of a loved one, like remember that loved one, or helps you just to kind of focus and creates that space and environment for you to focus on things that you do have and things that you are grateful for, right? Sometimes it's just creating that space and that environment where we can see that and where we can focus that. And like you said, like a gratitude practice of some sort, even if it's just a couple minutes, I think creates the space to do that. It's just a shift in focus, which sounds so small. And I know, it can be talked about. It's talked about a lot, but it's powerful. It is powerful, right? It is powerful. I've heard people, I've experienced it, but I've also heard people talk about it, about how it's then shifted the way they've gone about their day.
That's why it's talked about a lot.
I know, right? Exactly. And it's not, just because you have a gratitude practice or you focus on the things that you're grateful for, it does not in any way mean that you are avoiding or not recognizing like some of the challenges or the things that you're experiencing, right? It's not this idea of like, okay, I should be thankful for this, or I should be great. Look at all these great things, right? And it's not that. It's more of just honoring and expressing that level of gratitude. It doesn't mean that things aren't challenging in your life, or things that you're experiencing hard things, right? But the focus is on these other things that just shifts your mood and like your experience, that really, I believe, builds like resilience to deal with the really, really challenging things in our lives.
Yeah, I am so glad that you shared all of that. I agree with everything that you just said. So this has been such a great conversation. Are there any resources that you would like to share with people watching today?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to share. So, one resource one person that I've been actually recently following and reading his work his name is David Kessler. He's actually a grief expert. I'll send you his information, but he has a book about making meaning out of loss. That's his most recent book. And so I'll send you that information. I've enjoyed reading his things. I've enjoyed reading his articles. It's really helped me on my journey and as I've experienced grief. And then I would say too, mindfulness and like meditation has helped. And I think it kind of relates to what we were even talking about earlier, is bringing ourselves to like a calm state in order to kind of acknowledge what our emotions and what we're feeling and experiencing that. So I'd say those resources, finding kind of either guided meditation or something that works for you to kind of focus and bring yourself to that state of calm. I've been recently using the Calm app, and that's they have daily meditations and daily exercises that have been really helpful. But those two tools and like resources have helped on my journey, and I'd love to share them with your viewers as well, that in service of their journey along experiencing grief.
Thank you for sharing those. Those are definitely great resources. I'll include that in the notes below. And I would just add to, that meditation is great. There's so many apps and YouTube videos. There's so much free meditation. I know a lot of people, me included, struggle with just sitting in silence. I can do it sometimes, but I'm usually a better meditator when I have a guided meditation to follow. So I second that. And also just, I was going to say something and now it just left my mind.
It'll come back.
It'll come back. Yeah, just the mindfulness, taking care of yourself. Now I remember. There's a lot of meetup groups and support groups. So you could go on meetup.com. Or you could probably do a Google search on any local grief groups or any internet groups, virtual groups that cover all of these topics. Like there are groups out there for people who do have dysfunctional families that are there to support people who are going through that. There are grief groups for people who've lost loved ones. I know there's groups out there that support parents who've lost children. There's a lot of other groups, and I'm guessing there's probably groups out there for people who've lost employment. I'm not even sure, but I'm guessing there's probably a lot just on LinkedIn. If you just go on LinkedIn, there's a lot of support that you can find, just like on articles on there, connecting with your network, just to see if they know anything. You never know. Somebody knows if a job has opened up.
Yeah.
So just putting yourself out there on LinkedIn.
Completely.
It's a great resource. Definitely.
Completely. Yes. And there are groups out there too for people that have lost their jobs. I was actually part of a group of, we were all kind of in the same boat. We were all, our roles had been terminated, and so we were on this journey of finding our new roles. And so we would meet weekly. And it was great because you would just exchange what everyone was experiencing, things that they were trying, things that they were experimenting with to land a new job and what that looked like. And yeah, it's a great opportunity to network because you're sharing of yourself, and you're being completely, in a way, vulnerable. Like, I've lost my job. I'm in this place. I'm looking for a new job. Great. So you have conversation. Well, what do you do? And then you never know who might know someone that's looking for someone that has the exact skills that you have. Right. So you start that conversation. And then you just never know what connections you're going to make. But like you said, I think it does take a step of being vulnerable, right? Like being vulnerable and putting yourself out there.
Absolutely. And just connecting with people. And when you have someone going through a similar experience as you, whatever it might be, there's a lot of comfort in that, because it can feel stressful if the people in your life, they don't understand because they're not going through a similar experience. So maybe they can be supportive to a certain point, but somebody who you can buddy up with and connect with, who you can just vent to, who's also going through the similar thing, and like you said, they've tried different things, you've tried different things, you exchange what you've learned, and you never know what that connection can bring down the line. Exactly. Yes. We are all connected in some powerful way. Exactly. This is so true. And what's the best way for people to connect with you? Yeah, sure. So I've got a website. So it's just www.tanyajaklis.com. People can connect with me there, especially if they're interested in learning a little bit more about one-on-one coaching. I do offer a free discovery conversation just for us to get to know each other and see if coaching is a good fit for them. I'm also on LinkedIn and then also on Instagram too. So definitely feel free to connect with me in those places as well. And would love to get to know folks and learn more about them. Awesome. I will also include all the links in the notes below to make it easy. Excellent. Well, this was a great conversation. Thanks for stopping by again. And I look forward to future conversations we might have down the line that we've talked about. And so thank you again for joining us, Tanya. And thank you all for joining as well. Take care. Bye. Bye. Thanks, Jen.